welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers, and you are in the bonus feed, where each and every week, whether it's in season or in between seasons, as we are right now, between the concluded season 5 and the upcoming season 6, either way, here on the bonus feed, we have new exclusive episodes each and every week. It's the never-ending season. It's the Bob Dylan tour of podcasts. It rolls on and on and on. And also, if you've been listening to the bonus feed for any length of time, you know that pretty much every week, they are intentionalized episodes, which means people who support the podcast at that tier, thank you very much to those of you who support it at that tier or any tier, they choose a show for us to watch. It could be a full show. It could be a single match. We have many curated lists. We have a couple patron saints of the curated list that bring us those each and every month. It could be a movie. The case, though, of this week's show, it is something that when it first came to my attention, Jeremy, I was like, well, do we have an enemy in our midst here among the patrons? Because we have talked about, for all our love of so many different territories, even going back into the 70s, the 60s, there is one territory in particular that can be a slog. There's a particular show from 1974. I don't recall whether it's in the bonus feed or in the free feed, but it completely broke me. The Blackjack Lozanza show.
Yes.
If you know, you know. Of course, the territory that we're talking about is WWWF, coming to all of us from Madison Square Garden. This particular show that Patron Richerd chose for us is from December 17th, 1979. So the Christmas month show for the WWWF at Madison Square Garden. However, I won't spoil. We'll go through. We'll let it wash over you, the listener, like it did both of us. You never look at the card. This time, I didn't have time to look at the card, and I was so happy that I didn't. We'll just say from the top, I understand after watching this show why Richard chose this for us to watch, because there are so many people on this show that I would not have thought would have been on a Madison Square Garden WWWF show in the year 1979.
This you mentioned December 17th, 1979, so we're talking 2 months after my birth. This happened at Madison Square Garden, Season 8, Episode 1, if you're watching on any of the WWE archived services, be it Peacock, Netflix, WWE Network, whatever it is today. You can find it, Season 8, Episode 1, where we talk about WWF from Madison Square Garden. I, like you mentioned, let the show wash over me. And I, like you, was questioning why anyone would pick this for us. And by the end of the show, the surprises, the folks that kept appearing on this show, I was like, how did this show even happen, first off? And second off, how did Richard ever find that this show happened? Unbelievable. So
was this show booked by the great-grandfather of the randomizer?
My goodness. We'll go through it. And Howard Finkel, the dulcet tones of Howard Finkel, welcome us to Madison Square Garden. He runs down the physician and timekeeper and referees. And then
the judges, which is amusing because I don't think there's any actual judging taking place on this show. Never has been. They always do that Madison Square Garden. I guess it's just a athletic commission formality talking about these exhibitions. I love how they have to say that, professional wrestling exhibitions.
We have our opening. So they announce each match as like match 1, match 2, match 7 of the night, match it, right? So this is the opening match of the night. Dick Bulldog Brower taking on Larry Zbyszko.
Larry Zbyszko, one of many men on this show who look the same age for approximately at least 20, if not 25 years. Larry Zbyszko here in 1979. Some 20 years prior to him being an announcer on Monday Nitro and doing the occasional match, like against Eric Bischoff, for example, he is 28 years old.
He is.
He looks no younger in the face or the body than he did as a 50-year-old man.
The man across the ring, however, Bulldog Brower, 46 years old, looks no less than 60.
So Bulldog Bob Brower, they refer to him as the one-man riot squad, which is an awesome name, but it does not fit for this man who definitely has, we've talked about before, that like 60s, 70s territory substitute gym teacher look. He also, my notes say, oh my God, Bulldog Bob Brower is basically
Dick Brower, not Bob.
Excuse me, Bulldog Dick Brower is basically Otis in the year 1979, physically, facially, the whole deal.
Yeah, this match, not much to it. Zbyszko, Brower did the chin lock with the hair pulls. Zbyszko did a million stomps in the corner. Both men bonk heads. Brower scoops him up for a slam. Zbyszko shifts his weight, lands on top of Brower, gets the pin. 4 minutes, 49 seconds of nothing.
Yeah, some weird stuff quickly about this match. First, the finish, Bulldog Dick Brower, the bigger of the two men. Larry Zbyszko is Larry Zbyszko size. And yet the finish is the classic little guy can't hold up the big guy and collapses under the weight and gets pinned that way. So that was a little bit wacky. Also, we randomly hear like a note or two of accordion playing at multiple times throughout this match and throughout this show. Very strange. Also, Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling grunters, Bulldog Dick Brower.
And I'm one match in going, what are we doing here? Richard, what did you do to me?
We should also note in terms of what would you do to me, this is as it was often on Madison Square Garden shows of this era, a Vince McMahon solo commentary production.
Yep. And then we get to the next match, and it all makes sense. We see a graphic telling us the NWA North American Tag Team Championship is on the line. And we get an announcement from Howard Finkel saying the Japanese Tag Team Championship is on the line. Seiji
A few things. I always love how, for one, the NWA North American Tag Champs aren't the Japanese tag titles. Also, there are no Japanese tag titles. I always love how, in wrestling of this era, even into the 80s, they would just make up a singular championship for the entire country. Like there weren't promotions that existed. That's what's going on here.
Seiji Sakaguchi and Riki Choshu, and it's spelled on the graphic as Chosyu. It's obviously Riki Choshu, and he'll be called Choshu the entire match. But yeah,
by both Howard Finkel in the ring introduction and Vince McMahon on commentary. This is a young Riki Choshu. He's got short hair. That always throws me off, but he is young man jacked. That is the one thing to take away from all the New Japan guys, because this is only half of the New Japan contingent that we see here in the WWF in 1979. They are all ripped to shreds and bulky for their size.
Yeah, so you got Sakaguchi and Riki Choshu taking on the team of Bad News Alan Coage and JoJo Andrews. Of course, Bad News Alan, the future Bad News Brown, Bad News Alan of Stampede Wrestling. This is him with hair.
With some hair. He has, if you ever wondered why Bad News Alan shaved his head, why he was bald, this match will quickly answer the question for you. You just have to watch. I can't do justice to describing it. The hair, the whole presentation of Bad News is so weird here because I've only ever seen him, whether it be Bad News Allen or Bad News Brown, black boots, black knee pads, black tights, bald head, the glove, that whole deal. Here he's wearing red tights, red boots, red knee pads. He's got the hair.
White glove.
He's wearing a red vest, the white glove, as he said, just a totally different vibe. Then his tag team partner, JoJo Andrews, he has some of the worst gear you have ever seen. He's not in shape, long blue tights with short black tights over them, black singlet top, and for no justifiable reason, purple furry boots.
Choshu and Bad News were fun. Good strikes by Bad News. Sakaguchi's in. He's throwing chops. JoJo hurts him with a headbutt. Tags Choshu, and he throws a drop kick. Sakaguchi back in with a sleeper hold. Bad News tags back in. Bad News takes him down by the arm. We get a head scissors on the mat by Sakaguchi. Choshu comes in and he starts stomping the leg of Bad News. And Choshu he's just working so fast for 79 WWWF.
100%. It's till much later on this show when we see someone working this fast. And it's also crazy. Like, this show is filled with, obviously, WWF territory wrestlers, but a lot of guys from other territories.
Yeah.
And
Bad News and JoJo are from Stampede, right? So yeah. And then New Japan guys.
Anytime you see anyone on this show that's not a WWWF in 1979 wrestler, the pace is so much faster than the house style. And it also just made me think of when Choshu jumped from New Japan to All Japan in '84, and that instant injection of speed and pace that he brought to All Japan. Seeing him as a young wrestler doing that in 1979 Madison Square Garden is pretty crazy in its own right.
Choshu gets cut off. They start double teaming him. He makes a tag to Sakaguchi, and he comes in with huge chops. Loved that.
It's just cool to see Seiji Sakaguchi like as a wrestler. Like, we're so used to seeing him as a management guy, the guy standing in the ring on New Japan shows for a long period of time, reading the proclamation, sort of in that role, figurehead or not. Like, seeing him as sort of the legendary wrestler that he was, a tall, really good shape in his own right guy that was only 37 years old here.
He hits a backbreaker, gets a 2 count. Sakaguchi hits a high knee and then a full Boston Crab. Choshu comes in to cut off Bad News so he can't make the save, and JoJo submits. 9 minutes, 44 seconds. Still the Japanese tag team champions.
Yeah, this was fun. It was great. It was really a trip seeing this version of Bad News Allen, seeing young Riki Choshu like throwing drop kicks and just moving, and he didn't have the lariat or the Scorpion Deathlock yet, but otherwise he was the same Riki Choshu. And then just the it's always cool to see one of those guys that we've talked about before, so Vern Gagne or all these different guys that you just think of as old men. Seeing them as young men just wrestling a match is always really interesting. That was definitely the case here with Sakaguchi. And then just like you always say, just letting this wash over you, seeing these guys in the ring on this show, very unexpected.
No, and we will forever, whenever we see a Riki Choshu mentioned, we will always call him Koshu from now on, and it'll be our joke for us and the patrons. We'll always refer to him as Koshu.
Exactly. Also, just a quick note that we see throughout the show, like, there's guys from all different territories, right? Vince never mentions where these guys are from. The words New Japan Pro Wrestling are never uttered. Stampede Wrestling is not said. We'll see a match later where Howard Finkel mentions the name of the promotion, but Vince McMahon does not. So we always look for those early instances of like Vince McMahon isms. And this is one of those things that you associate with, 80s, 90s, into the 2000s WWF, but it was here in the late 70s.
Johnny Rhodes taking on Mike Graham, the Mike Graham, son of promoter Eddie Graham from Florida. Mike Graham introduced as being from Tampa, Florida, and Mike Graham's I'm like, a young Mike Graham, but I looked it up. He's 28 here already. He's in 1979. He was already 28. I remember him in 90s WCW.
Oh yeah, I mean, but he looks again like just the hairstyle. Like, this is an all-timer hairstyles match. There's a few of them on this show, but you've got Mike Graham with, I think, just a completely ridiculous look. He's a short, small dude. He's got a bright red King Kong Bundy style singlet.
Ill-fitting.
Ill-fitted for sure. Blue knee pads and big bushy brown hair and some facial hair as well. And Johnny Rhodes is like, it's one of those guys I feel like I've seen the name of a million times. As a trainer, all this different stuff. Just a guy that was in the promotion in the territory forever. But I can't recall ever seeing a full Johnny Rhodes match before.
Yeah, he's in the WWE Hall of Fame, which is hysterical. Johnny Rhodes sucks. We watch it, so just watching this match alone sucks. Graham was really good selling. He had good fire. Graham wins with a figure 4, 5 minutes, 3 seconds.
Yeah, total nothing match. The only thing in this match that really amused me at all was Johnny Rodz is biting Mike Graham's leg for an uncomfortable period of time to get out of a hold. Vince says, you can see the saliva on Mike's leg. Saliva.
Making his Madison Square Garden debut, the fabulous Hulk Hogan with his manager, classy Freddie Blassie, taking on Ted DiBiase. I'm watching this card wash over me. This is like the 4th match on this card. Crazy.
Insane. This is obviously the earliest Hulk Hogan appeared in the WWF in Madison Square Garden. As you said, this is outside of anything in Japan. Like, this is the earliest I've seen of Hulk Hogan in the States. I had no expectation he would be on the show. And then young, fiery babyface Ted DiBiase, who we've seen in Mid-South, we've seen a ton of different territories. You forget how many guys had cups of coffee in the WWF, or at least on Madison Square Garden WWF shows in the 70s or early 80s that then weren't there for years and then would resurface, in the rock and wrestling glory years, into the mid to late 80s, early 90s. And Ted DiBiase is certainly one of those guys here.
Yeah, Hogan's 26 here. DiBiase's 25.
Wow.
Hogan was 2 years into the business at this point. So he would wrestle.
Which is crazy, because we'll see, like, he's not a fully formed wrestler, but my God, when you think of other guys his size in the 70s and 80s that we've seen that were 3-4 years into their career, they had no presence. They had no idea how to wrestle, like the basics at all, and just looked lost out there. And you could tell they were only there for their size. Here, while this is a still fairly green Hogan, he stands out so much particularly among all the other in territory WWF guys. You talk about someone different than Tiger Mask, because that was like the athleticism, but someone that just looks like he's beamed in from another world compared to the presentation of wrestling in this territory at this time. That's Hogan here, and he is also massive. This is the biggest I've ever seen him.
Just, so big.
His legs are like tree trunks. His chest, it's like Hogan's body dimensions, like his length of limbs, but everything is the thickness of Scott Norton. It's weird.
Yeah, Hogan would leave WWF in 1980, so he was here briefly. He'd be gone less than a year and head over to New Japan, and then he went to the AWA 81 to 83, where that was the earliest I had seen him, was that AWA show where him and Bockwinkel, he doesn't win the title, and we're like, holy cow, like, he's your guy. Like, he's a fully formed Hulk Hogan in 1983. And then he would return to the WWF for his legendary run, obviously, in 84. Hogan showing off the power early, taking him down. DiBiase doing amateur sit-outs. And then he hits a series of arm drags, and Hogan is bumping all over for DiBiase. He's the heel here. DiBiase's the fiery babyface. The crowd is loving it.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see Hogan like as this big physical marvel, but like you said, bumping for DiBiase off drop kicks and arm drags, doing the like cowardly heel stuff, saying, oh, he pulled my hair, he pulled my tights. He gives the ref an atomic wedgie to show the ref what he falsely claims Ted DiBiase did to him. Like, he is a great heel here at, you said 26 years old, being managed by Freddie Blassie.
After DiBiase gets knocked through the ropes to the floor, Hogan suplexes him back in from the apron. He does a big leg drop, and DiBiase sells this leg drop like it killed him. This was the best leg drop sell I've ever seen. I rewound it and watched it. I'm like, tremendous stuff from DiBiase.
The best Hogan leg drop sell I've ever seen. The only thing I would put in the same pantheon as Arn Anderson selling the Alabama Jam from Bobby Eaton. There's that great gif where, like, in full speed, it looks like it killed him, and they slow it down, and you can tell he didn't actually even touch him, but Anderson sells it like a fish flopping out of water. It's also crazy because, you think of just a few years later, we've talked about this before in Hogan matches pre-WWF title, but seeing Hogan hit the leg drop as just a move, just like a Harley race knee drop, or, just your random dude elbow drop that isn't the finish, is always weird.
Hogan puts on a chin lock, and we get to see DiBiase Hulk up and then ram Hogan into the buckle to break the hold.
Hulk up, also like great flailing and fighting to get out of this. We talked about it on one of those early Mid-South shows where he was a babyface. Like, if you grew up only seeing him, like your first exposure and only exposure to Ted DiBiase was seeing him as the $1 Million Man in the WWF, you would have no idea how great of a baby face he was. Like, no idea.
In the bonus feed right now, you should listen to the Mid-South episode where DiBiase bled buckets of blood. That is an all-timer, and you already paid for it. It's in your back catalog if you haven't listened to that Mid-South episode. One of the best. So in this match, we get a backbreaker by Hogan, puts on a bear hug, and DiBiase is out. Hogan is your winner to a chorus of boos, 11 minutes, 12 seconds.
Well, how about earlier in the match, like after the leg drop, that Hogan hits a great running elbow drop, only 2, and then like a few sequences later, the bell starts ringing. And like, it was during that sleeper hold, and Vince like, is the match over? No, it's not over. Like, just someone, I was like looking around for Dick Togo and Evil with the fake bell ring spot. Like, I didn't thinking maybe DiBiase joined the House of Torture, but thankfully that's not what happened. But man, what a performance from young Ted DiBiase as a babyface, and what a revelation 26-year-old heel Hulk Hogan was. This is, like you said, pre-New Japan, pre-AWA, obviously his all-timer run in the WWF. Like, this was, you could see again that he was a legit player right away.
Howard Finkel introduces the WWF president, Hisashi Shinma, who was the president of WWF from 1978 to 1984. He was succeeded by Jack Tunney as the figurehead president of the WWF. Crazy.
Yeah, it's one of those things, again. Like,
I forgot all about that.
You don't remember it at all. And yeah, he introduces us to what a match this is.
Wait, before we get there, one more thing about Shinma's most famous moment as WWF president. December 6th, 1979.
Well, let's save that for the guy that this involves coming up.
Okay.
Let's save that for the guy this involves coming, because that's going to spoil who we're going to see in a match or two down the line.
Gotcha. Okay, we'll save that. Here, this match, Texas Death Match for the
the big, boldest, brightest, most italicized, most underlined, most highlighted quotation marks you could possibly have, a Texas Death Match. If you've watched any of these WWF shows we've reviewed, I believe we had one prior Texas Death Match that was not under Texas Death Match rules.
No.
So this is not under Texas Death Match rules. It's anything goes, but there's no pin and 10 count. The falls don't count, all that sort of stuff. The rules are simple. It's just a no disqualification match. The previous time we saw one of those in this territory, they fought it like a no disqualification match. Let's see what happens here.
WWF Championship, the challenger, Big Bad Bobby Duncum, managed by Captain Lou Albano, taking on the WWF champion Bob Backlund, managed by Arnold Skaaland. Both men are in short black trunks in annoying fashion. That should not happen.
So there's two problems with this. They're wearing the same gear, always a pro wrestling fashion faux pas, particularly for you, Jeremy.
Yes.
And this is a Texas death match, and they're just wearing wrestling gear. Where's the jeans?
Nope.
Where's the knee pads over the jeans? Why is the supposed cowboy in this match not dressed like a cowboy?
It's already bizarre. This, for a Texas death match, it also starts out incredibly slow and with lockups. So no fighting here. This is all just lockups and a slow start with stalling. This is all Backlund early. A long headlock by Backlund in this Texas death match. Snooze fest.
We get and we associate it with Ricky Steamboat, and then we learned really we should associate it with Jack Briscoe.
Yes.
With a long side headlock takeover, headlock, can't throw the guy off spot that you get in like a really technical scientific world title match. That's like the first 5 or 6 minutes of this Texas death match. Also, we should note on commentary, we always talk about parachuting into shows in the territory era in particular, and how good of a job a lot of announcers do, whether it be a Lance Russell and Bob Caudle, a Gordon Soley, even think to Les Thatcher on that Smoky Mountain show that we reviewed not too long ago in the bonus feed. Vince McMahon does a terrible job throughout the show on catching us up on the history of any of these guys, on why they're wrestling, what happened in the last month leading up to this. He makes like one offhanded, just random comment about like, well, they wrestled last time and something happened. Like, that's the extent of what we get. It's extremely frustrating.
I was also frustrated that we finally get Duncum cutting off Backlund, and all he does is go to choking. So he's choking Backlund out.
Nerve holds. Ugh. Why does the WWF have the worst cowboys in wrestling? I think of Outlaw Ron Bass. Here, Bobby Duncum. What they did to Dick Slater, like, just really, really terrible. There's not
my notes say I want this match to end. That's what my notes say at this point.
It's horrible. Also horrible. Vince McMahon, like, everyone complains about when Gorilla Monsoon would like act against what the wrestlers were trying to get over, and like a guy would have someone in a hold and say, well, he's got no chance of finishing with that. Vince does that multiple times on this show, including in this match. Duncum keeps rolling Backlund over for pins out of the headlock, and Vince repeatedly tells us, well, Backlund's in no danger of being pinned here. What are you doing?
Duncum rams Backlund into the ring post, and he stumbles away, falling over the barricade into the front row.
This is so bad. So he gets buckled into the post on the apron, and then just runs down the steps and takes a header over the guardrail. Like, even the most generous interpretations of pro wrestling physics could not justify this.
No, so seeing him down on the concrete in the front row, pro wrestling history tells me he's going to come up bleeding. It's a Texas death match and all. And he got rammed into the post in the 70s. That's almost instant blood. And here, no, he's just trying to get back in the ring. Duncum won't let him back in. Finally, Backlund sunset flips his way back in for a 2 count. And the finish of this Texas death match comes with Duncum whipping Backlund into the buckles. He charges in. Backlund goes up and over, sunset flip out of the corner for a 3 count. Not to get a 3 count to start a 10 count. It's just over. Backlund is still the champ. No one is bleeding. And Vince McMahon, like you mentioned, said that this is a rematch. The Texas Deathmatch stip is a rematch because this match was signed because the last match ended with a blood stoppage. So they wanted to make sure this one wouldn't end in a blood stoppage. So you have no holds barred, Texas Deathmatch. Nobody bled. This match was over in 17 minutes and 18 seconds. No, somehow this was only 17. Yeah, it was 17 minutes of a basic wrestling match. There's no way this wasn't 30 minutes. I was questioning the Fink's count on this. It was hideously boring. I was appalled at what this was. Like, why bother? Like, why not just have another match then?
Yeah, this was for we think you take all the context, this is Madison Square Garden. This is a Bob Backlund world title match, so it's supposed to be a big deal. The Texas Death Match stipulation, what happened the previous month, and what they gave us here. This is one of the worst matches we've ever reviewed on this podcast. It was awful. I thought Vince McMahon was also terrible in this match. I mentioned the acting against this match needed all the drama it could get from the announcer, and instead Vince is trying to suck drama out by saying a pin couldn't happen. Also, there are 2 roll-ups in this match that aren't sunset flips, completely different from each other, that Vince McMahon calls a sunset flip. Bob Backlund, in the closing moments of this match, hits 2 sunset flips, one from the apron in, and that other Booker T style tip up out of the corner into a sunset flip that leads to the finish. He calls neither of those a sunset flip.
Our next match for the NWF Championship, the challenger, the great Hussein Arab, a.k.a. the future Iron Sheik, taking on the NWF champion, Antonio Inoki, on this show.
So Antonio Inoki on this show, which is, this isn't a complete shock because we've seen him before. We saw him in that 1985, that battle royal that he was in. The NWF title was at times a legitimate title. It was created by Pedro Martinez for the NWF promotion in 1970. Multiple times it's entered the lexicon of New Japan Pro Wrestling. This is a really strange time in the history of Antonio Inoki and the history of the WWF title, which we just saw in the previous match. So in just a few weeks prior to this, on November 30th, Antonio Inoki defeated Bob Backlund, the WWF champion in Japan, to win the championship. Bob Backlund then on December 6th, so 11 days prior to this show in Madison Square Garden, won a rematch to win the title. However, WWF president, the aforementioned Hisashi Shinma, declared this rematch a no contest due to interference from Tiger Jeet Singh, and Inoki remained champion. Inoki refused the title on the same day, and it was declared vacant. Backlund later defeated Bobby Duncum in a Texas death match on December 12th to regain the title, according to this Wikipedia entry. Inoki's reign is not recognized by the WWF / WWE, and Backlund's first reign is viewed as uninterrupted from 1978 to 1983. There are so many layers to this whole situation, so many different stories as to what happened, what was kayfabe, who got screwed, who didn't get screwed. What a weird time that we dropped into.
Literally a week before this show, Inoki was the WWF champion.
And obviously the magazines were what they were, so it was documented in Japan. Just what a strange time.
So we go back to this NWF title match, a young Iron Sheik here against Antonio Inoki. Great
a young
Hussein Arab
Iron Sheik, who talked about it before at Larry Zbyszko. Iron Sheik looks not a day younger here than he would 10 or 11 years later in his brief WCW run. I remember a match against Sting, and he looked no older there than he did here. He just looked really old already here.
Hussein jumps Inoki before the bell. Inoki fights back. He slams him. He's choking him with his gear. Great facial expressions from Inoki. The crowd is loving it. They love Inoki as he's ripping up Hussein's gear.
Which is crazy. We've talked about before how unique it is. It's one of the things you can say about the WWF territory is that unlike pretty much every other territory in the country, you had many Japanese wrestlers, particularly the ones that would come over from New Japan as part of that working relationship. Not like Mr. Saito and Mr. Fuji, but guys like Inoki, Sakaguchi, Riki Choshu, they come over, they're baby faces. And Inoki in particular was treated like a conquering, beloved, special guest star babyface. It was here in 79 in that Battle Royal in 85. They love him, and he's such a great natural babyface even here in the United States.
Inoki's working a leg lock, and Vince McMahon says, quote, "Painful hold, but not a submission hold."
And this leg lock is what would go on to be known as a knee bar,
Yes.
which is maybe the most deadly leg submission hold in all of grappling. It's right up there with a heel hook as the most legitimately injury-inducing move you could do to someone. Vince like, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's just a wrestle.
Hussein he cuts him off. Antonio Inoki makes a quick comeback. He hits a standing drop kick, and then he starts throwing leg kicks. And then the Sheik throws a drop kick.
Even though it was a great drop kick by Inoki, but I was kind of prepared for that. I was not prepared for
Jim
this.
Neidhart levels of not prepared.
Literally was going to say Jim Neidhart, Road Warrior Animal level, shockingly great drop kick from a guy you wouldn't expect.
An abdominal stretch, and this Vince thinks could be a submission.
Even though it's not even the octopus, it's just a regular abdominal stretch.
Sheik hits his gut wrench suplex for 2. We get another transition to a leg lock by Inoki.
Before that, we get an Inoki sunset flip that was not called a sunset flip by Vince, but almost looked like Antonio Inoki invented the code red. It was a sunset flip, but he had his heels hooked into the underarms before he went over. This looked like a code red.
And he transitions out of that into a leg lock and then transitions to a bow and arrow. And then Inoki blocks getting rammed into the loaded boot of the Sheik in the corner. Inoki tries to remove the loaded boot. He does successfully. But while he's celebrating, Sheik loads up the other boot and kicks Inoki in the gut with it. He rams Inoki's head into the boot that was taken off. Inoki is now busted open. The ref takes the boot away.
Let's just acknowledge what just happened here. We had a Texas death match where the previous time the two men wrestled, there was a blood stoppage. So we had to come back for no rules. So if there was blood, the match would continue unabated. In that match, there was no blood. Here, in Antonio Inoki versus the future Iron Sheik for the NWF title, we get copious amounts of blood from Inoki off of a shoe shot.
So the ref took the boot away, and as he's taking the boot away, Inoki hits Hussein with an enziguri. Inoki gets the pin.
A very fast count from this referee, like double speed.
Hussein attacks Inoki and the ref post-match. Let's hear Howard Finkel announce the winner, Antonio Inoki.
The time of the fall, 14 minutes, 59 seconds. The winner of this bout and still champion, Antonio Inoki.
I thought that was weird to hear.
Yes.
I'm going to hear something weirder in about a second.
Yeah, so what we go to next, another championship match, and we hear Howard Finkel say the following match is for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship with a 60-minute time limit here.
What is this card? What is this card? How is this happening?
Like, we know they would have guest stars, but in 1979, 8 days before Christmas, it is Harley Race defending the NWA World Heavyweight title against the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
I'm like, okay, so to be fair, the WWF did not withdraw from the NWA officially until 1983. But they were operating, they were trading talent, but they weren't really booking the NWA champion very much. You had the occasional, superstar Billy Graham against the NWA champion, or you had the title for title matches that would be double countouts or double disqualifications or whatever. But holy cow, the NWA championship's just on this card after the WWF title.
Yes. When you think about it, like every other territory that was an NWA member territory, they didn't have a world champion. It was, they'd have the national champion or the North American champion or the Texas champion or whatever. here, the WWF, they have their own WWF championship that is their world title. But then they would occasionally bring this is Harley Race coming in and, wrestling, a young upstart, take your pick of whoever that would be from the WWF. This is like an offer match from the NWA here with the two biggest stars, Harley Race and Dusty Rhodes. Yes, we've seen Dusty before on MSG shows. He was a big-time guest star, maybe the biggest guest star they would bring in, but still seeing him in this context for the NWA World title with Harley Race just feels weird.
Yeah, so Rhodes beat Harley Race August 21st, 1979. So this is December. So back in August of the same year, he beat Race for the title. He lost it back to Race shortly thereafter, and then he would not win the title again until 1981. But like you mentioned, this was so weird. Here's the weirdest part. Listening to Howard Finkel introduce the NWA Championship. Let's give this a listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, referee Dick Kroll. This is the 7th bout of the evening with 3 all-star bouts to follow. This contest is for the National Wrestling Alliance World's Heavyweight Championship. 1 fall with a 1-hour time limit. Introducing first, to my right, the challenger. From Austin, Texas, weighing 261 pounds, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. His opponent from Kansas City, weighing 247 pounds, the National Wrestling Alliance World's Heavyweight Champion, Harley Race.
It's also noteworthy that Howard Finkel introduces this as being for the NWA World title. But like with guys from Stampede, guys from New Japan earlier on this show, Vince does not ever refer to it as the NWA title, the NWA World title. He goes down the recent history of what's happened with this belt, with Dusty Rhodes and Harley Race, but he just says the title or the championship.
The champion,
refuses. Yeah, he does not call it by its name.
These two start out quick. Totally different pace, totally different feel, and it took the crowd a bit to recalibrate and adjust to what they're seeing.
Yeah, this is so different from everything else we've seen on the show. You got a lockup, Harley backs Dusty up, hits a punch, then Dusty out of nowhere in response. It's a lightning fast flurry. He's doing Dusty stuff. Then we get a Harley Race shoulder block, Dusty with a backdrop, an awesome fast running elbow for a close 2 count. And my notes just say, wow, this is so much faster, so much better, and so much more dynamic than everything else on the show. Like, this is where you completely see the difference in pacing and just speed from, the NWA territories, whether it be Kansas City or Florida or all the different places that Dusty and Harley were in, as opposed to the glacial pace here in New York.
Rhodes sends Race to the buckles. He goes up and over to the floor. Back inside, Rhodes gets him in a pile driver position. And then he keeps turning, showing him off to each side of the ring, then hits the pile driver. Race is able to get his foot on the ropes to break up the count.
You get Harley with some headbutts out of the corner from his knees. The main offense throughout this match is headbutts from Harley Race. It's standing headbutts. It's the falling headbutts. It's rising headbutts from his knees. It's second rope diving headbutts. You see this and you think back to the recently aired Harley Race Dark Side of the Ring.
Sure.
And all you can think of, honestly, a lot like with Chris Benoit and what happened with him. Obviously, it wasn't to that level with Harley Race in terms of what he did, but you think about the problems later in life. You think of everything here about with football players and CTE. It's impossible that Harley Race did not have severe CTE when you watch a match like this and think of how many years, how many decades he was wrestling 3, 4, 5 nights a week, doing these moves, these variations of headbutts every single night.
Rhodes starts to fire up. Another 2 count after punches and elbows. Race hits a diving headbutt off the middle rope, drops a knee, and Dusty is busted open.
Busted open bad. The other thing, Dusty, we talked about the pace at the start of this match, but Dusty's selling, Dusty's just ungodly physical charisma is it's at such a different level from everyone else on the show. And everyone and anyone who is a regular part of this territory, like, I can just imagine, like, you can hear how into Dusty Rhodes as a wrestler and as a character Vince McMahon is on commentary here in 1979. You just wonder, like, how many times Vince tried to get Dusty, before eventually Dusty got fired, from the NWA, from Crockett, and then had to sign with Vince, and Vince punished him. But you wonder how much of that is a punishment for him refusing to sign with Vince before, because you see him here, and it's like, okay, this is the guy. Like, why are you building around Bob Backlund? If you could get Dusty Rhodes, it's just a completely different level.
Dusty's fighting back with elbows. The ref stops to check the cut. Rhodes is running wild on Race. Off the ropes, they bonk heads. Race is down. Rhodes tumbles out of the ring to the floor. Referee checks the cut again and rules the match over. Blood stoppage. The referee awards the match to Race. Loud bullshit chants from this MSG crowd, and they are correct in their analysis. They are correct.
It also bullshit in the sense that, so this is Dusty Rhodes in the WWF in 1979. And then I think of how many times Dusty as a booker used this finish. I think of the Flair Lex Luger match, which Dusty, I believe, may have been involved. Maybe that was after he left, but there were so many times where they would use that as an out for the baby face to save face, not get beat, but not win the title.
Yeah, and they did a similar finish in the previous match with Bobby Duncum and Bob Backlund, where it was a blood stoppage to set up the rematch. That's a very common 70s trope, is blood stoppage, save face, set up a rematch.
This was awesome, though. This was just under 14 minutes and so much better than every match. Again, like if you were going to say, like, what was the difference in ring between the NWA World Title and the WWF Championship in the late 70s going into the late 80s? You had it on display maybe 45 minutes apart from each other on this very show in Madison Square Garden, between the Backlund Duncum match, which was like the
awful.
Worst. It was the worst of, like, what we know that territory was in terms of their style. And then we saw Dusty and Harley put on probably a C plus B minus version.
It's a house show version of what they do. It's a house show version.
100%. That's the best description. This is a house show Dusty Rhodes Harley Race match, and not a big market. This is like a B market house show Dusty Rhodes Harley Race match here at the most famous arena in the world. And just with putting out like a B minus C plus effort, it so far eclipsed what the WWF Championship match was on the show.
Our night of championship matches continues. The WWF Intercontinental title is on the line. The challenger, Dominic DeNucci, taking on the first WWF Intercontinental champion. That's Pat Patterson. DeNucci got a few near falls, but Patterson ends up getting a reversal, kneeling on the shoulders of DeNucci, getting a pin out of nowhere. 6 minutes and 30 seconds of nothing.
Total nothing match. Only two notes were from the on the commentary side. I'm always amused when Vince calls the nose the proboscis. He called it that here. And Vince called an Oklahoma roll by Dominic DeNucci a sunset flip. So that through line continues throughout. So far, like, what we've seen of Pat Patterson outside of the boot camp match with Sergeant Slaughter, I've yet to see the Pat Patterson that I hear people talk about being so great. I'm sure it's there. It's probably earlier. It's probably, in California, San Francisco, stuff that didn't make tape, the Roy Shire promotion tapes didn't survive.
Right.
But I'm not all that into seeing Pat Patterson as a wrestler.
No, I agree. WWF Junior Heavyweight Championship. the challenger, Johnny Rivera, taking on the champion, Tatsumi the Dragon Fujinami. Again, this card washing over me. Tatsumi Fujinami I did not have showing up in like the 9th match of the night.
No, Tatsumi Fujinami in the WWF in 1979 after all of these other guys. Again, surprised, didn't expect it. It's also crazy because Tatsumi Fujinami still in recent years has been an active professional wrestler. Yes. He had a match against Hiroshi Tanahashi, one of his proteges just a couple of years ago. Still looks great for his age. Can't really move that much, but physically looks great. Here, though, my God, this guy is sculpted out of granite.
Crazy. It's crazy how jacked he is.
Jacked, like bulky but cut at the same time. Again, just looks like a Greek god. He is a junior heavyweight still at this point, and this is where we, I always talk on the Big Audio Nightmare about, I know it's blasphemy to say, but how like the idea of a junior heavyweight division in New Japan Pro Wrestling is almost like, it almost doesn't make sense anymore because guys that are junior heavyweights are basically the same size as heavyweights. Here, Tatsumi Fujinami as a junior heavyweight is significantly bigger than a guy like Sonata, a guy like Yu Uemura, even a guy like Shota Umino. Guys that are considered legit heavyweights. Now here he had to add bulk from here to move up from the junior heavyweight division in 1981, where they did that to make room for Tiger Mask as the top junior heavyweight. Crazy that this is a junior heavyweight body in 1979, but my God. Like, you hear stories about Tatsumi Fujinami in the late 70s into the early 80s, maybe being the best wrestler in the world. We need a whole lot more of late 70s, early 80s Tatsumi Fujinami on this podcast because, my God, every single thing he did in this match, every small movement, a go behind, a single leg trip, everything looked like the best execution you've ever seen of someone doing that particular move. He was unreal in this match.
The call to action, we need a Tatsumi Fujinami 70s curated list. Get on that, listeners. The match starts with hip toss, head scissors, kick out, and indie standoff in 1979.
My notes have the same thing. Indie standoff in 1979, just lightning speed, and the crowd is loving it. They're loving the handshakes. The wild thing about this match is, like, when you're watching Fujinami, you realize just how much of an Antonio Inoki protege he was, in that everything he's doing is stuff we saw Antonio Inoki do a couple matches prior. But as an athlete and as a wrestler, just between the ropes, between the bells, he is so much more crisp and there's so much more snap on all those same things he does than we saw from Antonio Inoki earlier on.
Yeah, my notes say almost the same thing, that this is the most athletic stuff that we've seen so far on this card. Rivera gets thrown into the buckle, comes off the middle rope with a crossbody for 2. They're trading near falls, all the back and forths, until Fujinami catches him in a German suplex with a bridge for the pin. Great ovation. Super fun match. The athleticism was just off the charts compared to everything else on this card. 10 minutes, 17 seconds. This flew by. I thought this was going to be, they were going to tell me that this was a 4-minute match. No, 10 minutes, 17 seconds. This is the opposite of the Texas Death Match.
Exactly. It's another one of those examples how about time is a human construct and doesn't actually exist, because there's like the fact that, like, you look at the time for this, you look at the time for that Backlund Bobby Duncum match. This was so good. It's amazing, really, that this could exist on the same card.
Yes.
As that Backlund Duncum match or a few of the other things that we saw on the show. It's just, it's worth watching. And there's also stuff on New Japan World that's worth watching with Fujinami from this time period. But, like, if your first and only exposure to Tatsumi Fujinami was post back injury, wrestling Ric Flair,
Super Brawl,
yes, the New Japan Super Show, and then the rematch at Super Brawl, which Fujinami was still a very, very good wrestler at that point. But if you've never seen this era of Fujinami as a junior heavyweight ace transitioning into being the best heavyweight in the promotion, if not the world, you know, do yourself a favor and check some of that stuff out, because you won't believe the wrestler this guy was at that time.
Final match, the WWF Tag Team Championship. Modern day, we say there's too many titles on AEW television. Holy moly, this show has so many title matches.
It has so many title matches, and they're also positioned in a way that the real stars get to beat the traffic.
They do
around intermission time, and you end up with almost a Saturday night's main event style card.
That's exactly how they structured this Christmas card.
This is your main event. That is the WWF Tag Team Championship. Victor Rivera and Swede Hansen.
It's been a while, Swede. It's been a while since we've seen you on the podcast.
Yeah, I think since the 2 episodes in a row that you made me watch for one show. I'll never forgive you for that, of WWF television from this era. But Swede Hansen, one of those names from, like, I remember reading about as a kid, but I don't think I ever actually saw him wrestle or even saw a picture of him until we started doing this podcast. He was just kind of a legend floating out there in the ether. They are challenging the champions, the team of Tito Santana, who we just in recent weeks had a really fun curated list of Tito Santana matches. Here it's Tito Santana teaming with Polish Power Ivan Putski, and as we said, a WWF Tag Team Championship match.
If you asked me a trivia question of, besides Rick Martel, who did Tito Santana hold the tag team titles with? I don't think I would have ever got to Ivan Putski, Polish Power, as his tag team partner.
Career contains multitudes. And in 1979, he was teaming with Ivan Putski as one half of the WWF Tag Team Champions. Then around 10 years later, he would be tag team champions as part of Strike Force with Rick Martel, one of my favorite WWF tag teams of all time. And then 5 years after that, he would be looking completely out of place, having no idea what to do in a trios match on AAA IWC Worlds Collide pay-per-view presented by WCW.
So, Santana and Putski defeated the Valiants, Johnny and Jerry Valiant, for the WWF Tag Team titles at Madison Square Garden in October of 79. So 2 months prior to this, and the duo held the tag titles for 6 months before losing them to the Wild Samoans in April of 1980, which I feel every program we watched from this time period, the Samoans were the tag team champions, or Rocky, and they were feuding with Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas, right? So I missed this weird period in the late 70s where the Valiants and Tito and Putski held it before the Samoans.
Yeah, this is making me long for the Samoans as tag champs, for Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson, for a few years later, Dick Murdoch and Adrian Adonis. This is a total nothing match. My only real note was one of absolute utter disgust over Victor Rivera's gear.
Yes.
Flesh-colored tights and flesh-colored boots, wearing no knee pads or no elbow pads. This looked like a naked man somehow not showing off all of his body parts, but completely naked, wrestling for the tag team championship.
Easy money's like, dude, your gear is gross, and that's when you
use some chaps and some stirrups.
So, yeah, this Putski. My notes just say Putski's short but jacked. This guy is huge for being so short.
We've seen Putski on a bunch of things. Remember he was on that AWA.
Yeah,
like that show from like the 60s or 70s that we reviewed. Like he's kind of popped up in some odd places.
And so did Scott Putski for a little bit there.
Yeah, appearing at both Thunder and Raw in the same year, I believe, in like 97 or 98. Former junior heavyweight competitor in the WWF in the Attitude Era, Scott Putski.
So the finish of this match is Putski hitting the Polish hammer on Swede, while Santana comes off the top with a crossbody to get the pin. Still tag team champions with ease. 6 minutes, 57 seconds. And that is your card from Madison Square Garden for Christmas. We've talked about the worst thing on this show. Have you changed your mind, or is it still the Texas Death Match?
Oh, no, it's still the Texas Death Match. The other stuff that was bad on this show was relatively short, and I was prepared for that level of bad, having
correct
considering how many times we've dropped into this territory, but that was, other things were not good. That was offensive to my sensibilities as a 40-year pro wrestling fan.
Best thing on this show.
Oh man, it's how fun it was seeing all the guest stars. I mean,
it was every surprise. Every match was a surprise. It was amazing.
Yes, it was Dusty and Harley having, again, like, I'm sure Vince Jr., Vince Sr., before Dusty and Harley went through the curtain, they told them, don't show up our guys. Just don't go all out. So they went out and went half effort and still had by far the best match on the card, and significantly better, as we said, than the WWF Championship match. But that match was great. Seeing Sakaguchi and Riki Koshu / Riki Choshu in there with a young pre-Bad News, and then Tatsumi Fujinami. And that match was so fun, and seeing Fujinami do those things in that match was so cool. Then Inoki being Inoki, like what a just crazy show.
We had all that stuff and Hogan's MSG debut with an awesome match with Ted DiBiase, like an awesome DiBiase performance.
Yes,
there was
Jesus,
a lot of good stuff.
That.
So much good stuff. So
this has to be like and this sounds like a challenge that I don't want to issue. I really, really don't. But I can't fathom a WWWF MSG show from this 70s to early 80s, 81 or 82 era. I can't fathom any other show being as fun as this one was, because of the guest stars, the different stuff. Like, usually these shows are a complete slog, and there were elements of that, but this was so much more fun. I should have had more faith in Patron Richerd, that he had not
Patron
turned
Richerd
heel
does it
on
again.
us. He took care of us as he always does. This was a delight.
Huge babyface Patron Richerd for bringing us this show. No heel turns with an MSG 79 show. So with that, we mentioned a lot of shows in the back catalog, so make sure you're listening to those. Again, evergreen content, so it's there for you. You already paid for it. Enjoy those shows, and if you want to be the randomizer, you can just bump yourself up to the next tier, submit the request. As long as it's over 10 years old, we'll watch it, and look forward to whoever puts together that Tatsumi Fujinami list for us. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to call it a podcast. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Patron Richerd. And this just feels wrong to say. Thank you, Worldwide Wrestling Federation of the 70s. What?
Thanks again to everyone for listening. I'll talk to you again next time.